Welcome back. As you can tell from the title of this video, we're going to be talking about eggs and the very important role they've played historically, the here and now, and the implications for the future, especially as we look at this through, the lens of preparedness. Now, let me be first to tell you and first to say, like I say in so many videos, I'm not here to give you my opinion. I'm not here to give you my bias. The purpose of this podcast and the purpose of this video is to give you the raw facts, to give you the data, to give you the research that is out there on the subject matter and allow you to come to your own logical conclusion, to allow you to be able to prepare for your family in the best way possible. Again, I can sit here and I can spin, any amount of news stories and, peer-reviewed research to try to scare you, to try to sell you the fear porn. But that's just it's not helpful. So again, the purpose of this is to give you the facts and allow you to come to your own reasonable conclusions that will help you best prepare for your family. So again, the subject matter I'm going to present to you is not my own. It's not my opinion. This is the factual data that's out there. Please take a look at the description box below. Look at the citations. Prepare for your family the best way possible. So without further ado, let's get started. So I think it's important to know, just looking at this topic from a historical standpoint, according to, again, not my opinion, but according to the scientists, according to the researchers, according to the subject matter experts in the field, human beings first started to hunt and scavenge eggs about 6 million years ago. And so this goes without saying. The experts have a very valid point based upon their analysis of this, that since the dawn of time, eggs have played a very important, significant role in the evolution progress of people. So I think it's important to know, regardless of where you stand on this, the experts have made it very clear that eggs have been a consumable food staple since the beginning, and so that's going to be important because regardless of where you believe we fall on the spectrum, humans have always depended on eggs for subsistence. So again, it goes back to a historical precedence, and I think it's important to take a look at that as we progress on in the timeline. So this is interesting. A lot of people don't know this. I didn't know this until I started to really look up the subject matter. But the scientists are telling us that the first domesticated birds happened about 7,000 years ago in China, and these birds were, as what we know now to be geese. So they believe geese were the first bird to be, or attempted at least to be, domesticated. And so they found a site in China that demonstrates all the qualities and attributes of bird domestication. And I think that's important because it comes no surprise. At some point, humans started to domesticate livestock, whether we're talking about poultry, whether we're talking about dogs, whether we're talking about other various livestock, such as goats, sheep, rabbits, cows, etc., cattle, bovine. The process started, and so understanding why that process started, I think is extremely important. And as we can see, this was something that was important enough where 7,000 years ago, people tried to start to domesticate, or started to semi-domesticate geese about 7,000 years ago. Next, we see poultry domesticated. Now, the dates of this are going to vary, everything from 5,000 years ago to 1,500 years ago. There's a lot of different data, but at some point we see poultry domestication happening in large swaths, everywhere from India to Eastern Asia. So determining when the first domesticated chicken happened obviously is still up for debate, but we do know obviously that it happened, and based upon the literature that we can see, that process started about anywhere, depending on the research that you look into and what you want to consider to be the first hen, anywhere between 5,000 to 1,500 years ago. So I think that's important because we see that, okay, the risk benefit analysis of this domestication is worth it. And so I think the important thing to look into now is, and talk about now, is the why. So let's talk about the why. And I think it goes to say that the reason why human beings started to domesticate livestock, especially, chickens, which is the same reason why we have domesticated other livestock, is because chickens have ability to produce meat and eggs without competing for human food sources. What does that mean? It means that you can rear and raise poultry and feed them things that you wouldn't feed yourself. So therefore, you are producing a food product that isn't in direct competition with the food resources that you are trying to consume. And I think that that's super important. And we see the same thing with various livestock, like my rabbits, sheep, my cattle. They eat grass. I don't eat grass. So their food source is not in competition with what I'm trying to consume. And this is a deeper conversation we can have in regards to, things like vegan ethics, which we'll leave alone for now. But it's important to understand that it's a true driving force as to why it was even worth the process of starting to cultivate these animals and domesticate these animals, which I find to be obviously extremely important, especially from a preparedness aspect, because eggs can provide you food year round. Once you start and have a good breeding program, especially with chickens, they can provide you both meat and eggs year round. So I find that to be a very important driver for why our ancestors decided to go through that route of domestication. So I think that's super important. I think that's important that we take into consideration both in the here and now conversations that we're about to have. So let's talk about why it's important from a physical lens that we look at this in the here and now. So if we look at eggs internationally, we can obviously see that they are a staple. They are international staple as far as food commodities go. Globally, every year the world is producing around 1,182 billion eggs annually. So it goes to show, I mean, it's a significant number. Um, and the context for that, as we can see, are great and obvious because, egg consumption has been popular since the dawn of time. And then it's still popular today. But what's really interesting are the underlying trends for the consumption of eggs. Let me give you an example. In America, our highest egg consumption rate was in 1945 when World War II was going on, and we were consuming around 404 eggs per person per year. Then for the next 78 years, we definitely see a large dip. For example, in 2022, we see that egg consumption is sitting around 277 eggs per person per year, which is up, significantly since, for example, say 2011, when that number was around 240 or so eggs per person per year. And so it's a very interesting dichotomy that we're seeing, that in fact, here in the United States, we're on a decline, and now we're starting to slowly come back up, especially within the last, 5 to 10 years. If you look at the data. And then if you look at, for example, our neighbors to the south, Mexico, you'll see that their egg consumption is significant. 400 eggs per person per year there in Mexico. And so if we look at this, we'll see that some of the largest, for example, consumer of eggs, Mexico, China, Russia, Ukraine, Malaysia, Paraguay, again, very high consumption of eggs per capita per person. So the one thing as preparedness-minded people that that we should be looking at, or that should be looked at, is the reasons for that. So what are the scientific peer research reasons for the increase in egg consumption, and why do we see this trend internationally, whether we're talking about here in the U.S., Mexico, Russia, our European neighbors across the water, the Asian countries. Why do we see these trends of consumption? So again, don't take my word for it. Let's see what the experts have to say. So what are the driving factors for increases in egg consumption? Well, the experts show us that there's eight major driving factors. So number one, they're a cheaper price point than your conventional meat, right? It's cheaper to get a dozen eggs, even in this market, than it is to buy a pork chop or to buy steak or to buy 6 drumsticks, etc. So overall, that price helps drive that consumption. Number two, they're more readily available. I mean, let's face it, your gas stations, your Quick Marts, your 7-Elevens, chances are they carry eggs, especially in the hard boiled variety. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a quick trip or something like that, and they have eggs right there. Um, Obviously, your grocery stores are going to have them. Local co-ops are going to have them. So, as far as being readily available, they are readily available, and the price point on them is usually cheaper than other conventional meats. Number three, they are nutrient dense. Four, they pair great with most foods. Again, you can eat them just hard boiled. There's a lot of places, especially your quick trips places, gas stations, that will sell them hard boiled. You can put them in soups. So, I mean, again, they can be eaten standalone or they can be easily added in most dishes. Number five, they're easily recognized and accepted. As we said before, internationally, eggs are recognized, they're accepted. People, anywhere you go in the world understand and recognize what eggs are and are very familiar with them. Number six, they're easy to store and preserve. Again, you can preserve them in your refrigerator, or if you have a little bit of mineral oil, you can have them stay outside room temperature for months and months at a time without spoilage. So that makes them a good choice. Number seven, they're seen as more ethical than other animal products. We see this actually regularly within the vegetarian, even the vegan communities. They're even amongst people that are very anti-animal products. Egg consumption is seen as a way more ethical choice. So obviously you have some of the, those driving factors as far as ideology goes. And then number eight, less government regulation historically, right? So if we look at 1945, the United States of America, we knew that we were on many of you guys know we were on a ration card system. Eggs were not included on those ration card systems. Therefore, they were an obvious choice based upon the other aforementioned things that we have already mentioned for why people would start to naturally gravitate towards consuming eggs. Again, you can easily pair them with any dish. Nutrient density. They're cheaper. They're more available. Easily recognized. So those are again all driving factors as to why egg consumption has increased. So when we worked in now, and so with that being said, we can see that there is an increase, and these are the reasons. And so it bears to point out, are these going to be fiscal, monetary, and ideological reasons for why we can continue to see the increase here in recent years? What do I mean by that? Well, it's clear if we look at what the science is saying, there's a really good correlation for egg consumption in the U.S. going up, whether we're looking at it from a price standpoint, whether we're looking at it from an availability standpoint, and whether we're looking at it from an ethical standpoint. So I think those are really important to consider in the here and now, because that is going to be the major driving force for what we plan to see in the future. So now that we kind of built the base here as far as the historical precedents and the here and now precedents in regards to the numbers and the facts, what does this mean for the future? So when it comes to future projections, this is where it gets a little interesting, because you have the USDA, you have the FDA, you have all these governmental agencies, especially here in the U.S. and also globally, right? You have all these think tanks that are saying that global egg consumption, U.S. egg consumption is going to continue to rise. So on one breath, the experts are telling us that. On the other breath, the experts are also stating that food commodity prices are going to continue to go up, as with inflation. And then with that, we're also seeing with these surveillance programs within chickens and stuff, we are seeing that has been a mass culling of laying hens here in the United States of America. In the last 16 or so months, we've seen over 58 million birds culled because the bird flu. So we do see that all these things are going to have an impact, because when you're getting rid of large quantities of your laying hens, That's going to affect availability. It's also going to affect price. And the experts have made it clear that we can expect egg consumption to be curbed or at least go down if consumers are not happy with the price point and are not acceptable when there's not an acceptable readability range for those commodity items. So in layman's terms, if the price isn't right and availability isn't right, you can't expect to see a increase of egg consumption, nor can you expect to have increased numbers. In fact, you might even see a decline. And again, this isn't my opinion. This is what the evidence is directly showing us. So why does this matter to the everyday prepper? Well, let's talk about that. So when we're looking at this again from a factual reporting standpoint, the reason why this is so important for us to understand as people in the preparedness community is because there's one factor here that I don't think a lot of people have recognized or will even be willing to accept, which is the scary part. And that is that people like myself, people like Mosaic Homestead, for an example, our food inputs are not factored into the equation. What do I mean by that? We'll take Mosaic Homestead's chicken bunker, right? You have a guy out there in Puerto Rico that is able to produce more chicken eggs than he could ever consume. Those numbers are not factored into that global consumption production number because those numbers are retrieved directly from grocery stores. Those numbers are retrieved directly from those that are sold in the open free markets that can be tracked. So Mosaic Masters inputs are not even calculated into the overall calculation. And why does that matter? Well, when we look at the stats of backyard hens in households, for example, it's estimated that 10 million U.S. households have backyard chickens, and that was of 2018. And as of 2018, that's 8% of all U.S. households have backyard chickens. So when you're talking about 10 million households not even being counted in the U.S. production of eggs, what does that tell you? Again, I'm not here to give you my opinions on the matter. I'm here to just bring you the factual evidence. But if you are unable to procure, for example, your eggs from anywhere but the grocery store, an important question to ask yourself is when we go back and look at the driving factors for egg consumption, what is your price point? Because eventually you're going to have to come to that realization, understanding what is my price point? What is acceptable? What is the acceptable range for the price of eggs? What is the acceptable availability for eggs? Those are all things that you're going to have to look at as somebody who's not a producer or somebody that is not able to get their eggs from a local producer. So if your only method of getting eggs is from the grocery store, which is the majority of people, that's going to be something that I would encourage you guys to look at and plan for. Because ultimately, again, people like myself, people like Mosaic Homestead are not going to be affected by any of these changes. I doubt if all egg production ceased to exist tomorrow because of any litany of logistical, ethical, or environmental reasons, Mosaic Masters is still going to be producing eggs in Puerto Rico. So again, those are things to factor in because the preparedness aspect is never factored in to these overall projection reports. They don't care. Not only do they don't care, you can't really get a good accurate reading of that. The data, again, when we're looking at things from just reality, they are factored in from that consumption-based reporting. And consumption-based reporting is grocery store reporting. Reporting from items that are bought and sold. And again, not trying to get into any conspiracies, digital currency, all that stuff. That's not the point of this video. But it is very important to understand the realistic nature of where these numbers are derived from and what they actually mean to the everyday person. So again, I encourage you guys to look at that and prepare in the best way for you guys, right? Obviously, these are a lot of big numbers. These are obviously have really important and big implications in regarding to eggs and What's their availability going to be, right? With 58 million chickens culled in the last 16 months here in the United States of America, what are those implications? With the rising markets in other countries, such as Mexico, Russia, Malaysia, Paraguay, all these other places, Ukraine, all these other places that are increasing their egg consumption. And again, for the aforementioned factors, how does that play to the everyday person that does require the grocery store for their substance and for their food? Again, those are all big questions you have to ask yourself and prepare for, but that is the factual reporting. Again, all my citations and sources will be in the description box below. I'm curious, tell me what you think. Do you think that there is a war on eggs? Do you think the United States has what it takes to produce and provide all its people with the necessary eggs that they wish to consume? Do you think it's better to just get out of the system and play by your own rules? Curious to know what you have to say in the comment section below. As always, guys, long live the Republic.